Hi, welcome back to Massenet. This week we're going to be talking about the 1948 film The Big Clock. So Anna, if you want
Oh,
to.
yes. Sorry, I was making sure I got all my ducks in a row on this one. There's a lot of names. So this movie follows George Stroud, who is like a reporter for this like crime magazine, journal, newspaper thing. He reports on crime, and he works for Earl Janeth. I was trying to figure out how to pronounce the last name. Earl Janeth. And Earl Janeth's having like an affair with this woman named Pauline. And George wants to quit his job to actually spend time with his family. But he quits, and Pauline kind of like distracts him into like taking down Janeth. And he misses his train to his 5-year postponed honeymoon. So him and Pauline run around and they get seen in all these wacky places. And then Janeth comes over to Pauline's apartment and like kills her after an argument, and he has his buddy, pal, assistant, somewhat gay lover cover up the crime for him, Hagen. And then everyone suspects that it's Stroud, although they don't know it's Stroud because it's like this like elusive man. And Stroud's put on the case to discover who killed Pauline, but he's also trying to be like, I didn't do it, and I'm the one that was with her that they think it is. So it's that. Very complex.
And this week we're going to be talking about the queer coding in the characters of this film. So to kick it off, I think it's pretty clear that Janeth was pretty heavily queer coded just in the way that like he presented as like a character. I remember in the Dyer article, it said that like queer characters or characters that are queer coded are always presented as being like stereotypically like put together and like coiffed, or like they dress nice and they care about their appearance. Like Janeth was like always seen in like his suits, and he was like getting massages, and he was like very proper. So that was one thing about Mr. Earl.
Yeah. He is presented as very like, and especially at that time period, how they presented gay people as like effeminate, which today we know is not how, but like back then they were like, oh, if you're gay, you're like a woman, which in and of itself is stupid. But the way that like I noticed they try to like overcompensate for that, because this is like, what year did this movie come out? Like 48? Yeah, this is 1948. They're not gonna be like, yes, a gay man. So they were like, they overcompensated by having him described as like this womanizer, hence the affair with Pauline. And then the argument, she's like, I know about you with this girl and this girl and this girl. Yeah. But then when you're watching that scene, you see no sexual and like energy, like you see no affection for each other in that. Like it's very like stiff two friends arguing versus like two people who were supposedly in a relationship. So they just said these words to make him seem like, oh, not gay, but there's no like actual like energy like coming through in the performance of it.
No, it's almost like a bit of a disclaimer almost of something like if like, you know, like production executives are ever sort of like, you know, like, oh, you're not putting like this content or like this sort of like hinting in the film, right? They almost have that line to point to of like, oh no, like, see, there's evidence that he's sleeping with women. He's not a gay.
Yeah. And even like they named like, yeah, he was naming a bunch of women. She was also like hounding him for his like sexual endeavors, I guess. So that was like, so like even if it wasn't like you're sleeping with a bunch of men, it was still like they were making it a point to like demonize him for like his sexuality, whatever that may be.
Well, I really like I watched that because we were told about the queer coding before we watched this film. And so I was looking for it, and at first I thought they were going to have it be Stroud that was queer coded because the main character, I assumed. And then I realized pretty quickly it's going to be Janeth. And you see in that like they purposely mention like she, her, woman, girl. Like they use those pronouns and nouns to like let you know, because the character is so heavily queer coded. But they also have this disclaimer, like this 1948 disclaimer, but he sleeps with women.
Yeah.
Sleeps with a lot of women.
Yeah.
Womanizer, if you will. Hashtag Britney Spears.
He's free.
Oh my God, that was a queer coded moment, wasn't it?
Oh my God.
So fitting.
And aside from Janeth, like with the whole, like they like kind of overcompensated, like he's like this this millionaire, he's in charge of everybody, but then again he's kind of like effeminate and demasculinized, and he's like very put together, quote unquote, which is like how gay people are always presented, like they're like the fashion icons or whatever for some reason. His assistant or his like secretary Hagen was the second queer coded person I noticed, and they had like such a like Siamese twin relationship. Like one was just like feeding off of the other, and then the other was like, I'll do this for you if you do this for me type thing. And it was like kind of this connection that they had that reminded me a little bit of Neff and Keys from Double Indemnity, where like it was like the guy in power and then the guy like his subordinate, and they had this like relationship that kind of like and broached the lines, but like walked the line in between like employer and like friend and more than employee type things.
I think that
yeah,
there is a difference. I noticed with that one is in Double Indemnity, or wow, I can't pronounce that word to save my life. Neff is trying to hide stuff from Keys. Like Neff does have his own like side story. Like Keys and Neff diverge in the story, versus in this story, Hagen is like on top with Janet. Like he is like with him till the end of the line. # Captain America. Like he's on it. I just am making so many culture references. But he's with them. Like he's not deviating. He doesn't have his own plot. He doesn't have his own agenda. He's just with Janet to do what Janet wants. It's very like more like parasitic.
It's also like Hagen has no reason to fully help Janet. Like, you know, like they work together. He could use this to like bribe him or whatever, but instead, like he's like, no, like let's hide it.
It almost reminds me of like
because a lot of the
like a main noir guy and femme fatale dynamic almost, especially with like the little confrontation they have at the end when Stroud and his wife and, you know, like all the others like come up, and he presents the evidence as if, you know, like he's implicating Hagen, I think initially to sort of like make Hagen turn on Janet, and sort of like, and then like, you know, like that moment where sort of like where Janet almost expects Hagen to go down with it and sort of like accord with the plan, and then Hagen is like, no, I'm actually not doing this for you, I'm breaking free. But it almost feels like that sort of like 11th hour twist where like the main guy breaks from the femme fatale and he's like, actually, I'm not following your plot anymore, fuck you.
Yeah, it's like the way that they spoke to each other. Like Hagen, instead of calling him Janet, because everyone's like afraid of Janet, he's like their boss, but he'd call him Earl. Like his employee, he'd be like Earl. And then at the end when he went out and got the police, he's like, no, Janet did it. And then he turns to Janet and he's like, you thought I'd do anything for you, huh? So I was like, oh, the queer coding.
And he was also, I think, the first person to call Janet by his first name, you know, like in like any scene. Because like I remember when that first happened, I'm just sort of like, ooh, he's calling him Earl. A little fruity, if I do say so myself.
And like, I'm gonna like somewhat topic twist this to go, because I just remembered a thought I had. Janet, he is, you know, this like really rich, successful businessman. And in a lot of the film noirs we've seen, those successful men have a wife. Do they step out on them? Yes. Do they like not treat them well? Yes. But like they always are married because they have this like they have to be expressed to the public in this very like redeeming way. And Janet just doesn't have that. He doesn't care. He's like work, and then there's always Hagen by his side. Like if we go off like the JFK theory that he was with the guy that he was friends with, he at least had Jackie.
JFK was gay, and I will die by that.
JFK was queer coded at least.
JFK was queer coded.
Queer coded by God.
Yeah.
Yeah,
He was at least queer coded in the photos. I don't know.
I was definitely thinking along the lines too of like going back to that Hagen is like in the place, like usually it would be like a female secretary that the boss has like is his mistress or whatever, like has feelings for, and then eventually like decides to plan to kill the wife or whatever. Something like that. So that's kind of how I watched it from the beginning. I was like, oh, there's like a man in this place, and then that's how like the relationship evolves, you know.
Yeah, and Hagen does separate from the femme fatale, because in the femme fatale characters we've seen thus far, it's a fun way to say it, they all have their own agenda. They all have their own reason for doing what they want. Even if we don't find it out till later, they have their own agenda. And Hagen doesn't really have that. Like he has like his pride and be like, I'm not going out for a murder I didn't commit. but like he doesn't have like any reason to help Janet besides what we're reading off like the social cues and all that like he's in love with him.
Mhm. I mean, I think the tension of like them not, let's say they are like together, like it is like that. The tension of not being able to be like public about it could be the reason that like, I don't know, other things escalate, you know.
Yeah. Also their relationship, Hagen and Janet was man, I just had a thought and I lost it.
Hate
Oh
when that
yeah.
happens.
It was kind of like this like ride or die kind of thing. Like you see it's like Kathy in Out of the Past. She was like, it's us to the end of the line, and then it's like it's just us. Like we're the like only made for each other type thing. And we see that with like the femme fatales and the main guys. It's like so that we got that with like Janet and Hagen, where it was like, you know, you and me, we're stuck together because we did this thing. We're like in Double Indemnity, it's Phyllis and Neff, where like they have this like shared experience where we see that between a man and a woman in the past films, but in this one it's between Hagen and Janet.
I also do think it's interesting that Stroud, who is our, you know, hero of the story, is, you know, the good married man who his whole reason for stepping away from the lifestyle he was living is to spend time with his wife and his kid. And then our bad guy, like, I'm not sure if the audience in 1948 even picked up on the queer coding, but let's pretend they did for a minute. If they picked up on it, they'd be like, oh, straight man who stays with his family, bueno. Gay man who murders people, no bueno.
And the evil
Like,
gay man tries to convince the straight man to come back to his corporate job and stay away from his wife.
That is the gay agenda. The gay agenda is working for a crime newspaper.
The gay agenda is capitalism. No.
The gay agenda is communism, let's be honest here.
Oh, yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. So aside from like Janet, I think I mentioned earlier how he was just kind of like feminized through like his appearance. Another character who I thought of when I was like kind of making that connection, I guess, was way back when we watched Maltese Falcon. Joel Cairo, I think that's how you pronounce his name. And he was also like, you know, he was wearing suits and he talked in like this very proper way, and he was like kind of like demasculinized. Like I think the first meeting he has with Humphrey Bogart's character, like he tries to pull a gun on him, but so quickly he gets disarmed. So like, and it's like Janet is like, you know, he did this crime, but then he has to go running to his boyfriend to fix it. It's like this kind of thing where like these queer coded characters are like kind of presented as being like not like incompetent, but like kind of like that. Like they're not like as strong as like the Humphrey Bogart character would be.
It's almost
Or
like it's sort of like in a one-on-one confrontation with, you know, like the main noir guy, the protagonist. When it's fair, the like, you know, they would always lose, because it's usually like when in the big clock, when Janet is getting an upper hand on Stroud, it's always because he's maneuvering some aspect of the company or you know, like his wealth or something like that, his position over Stroud, to sort of like to win there. But when it's sort of like just them to, you know, like Stroud doesn't really care about his connections to the company anymore. He has all the evidence he needs to like back Janet into a corner. Then like Janet doesn't have anything. All he can do is run away and then fall down the elevator shaft.
Well, also like going back to Kyra, like it seems like for like the straight man characters we have, like they put priorities in like justice and doing the right thing and fighting the bad guys. And, you know, our queer coded men are like, they, you know, flair and looking good while doing it. Like they do everything in like a, you know, like they flamboyant way. Again, it's stereotypical, and I didn't live in 1948. I'm not quite sure what the stereotypes of gay men were in 1948, but today we'd see that and be like,
yeah,
sir, that's a stereotype.
I mean,
but
like
1948.
I feel like, I don't know, like the one thing that sort of like kind of tipped me off to like Janet being queer coded was sort of like I sort of like almost saw some similarities between him and another character from one of the films that I watched for my first essay for this class. The character specifically was Waldo Lydecker in Laura, 1944, by Otto Preminger. And sort of, Waldo Lydecker apparently is like a very, very iconic and like very famous example of a queer coded character in film noir. And sort of like one thing that I like was thinking while watching The Big Clock was just like, oh, Janet has a lot of like Waldo vibes, and sort of like their similarities are in very specific ways of like, you know, they always look very like put together, like putting a lot of like care and just sort of like attention into their appearance. They always speak very like properly and eloquently, and sort of like with a little bit of like flair and sarcasm and like theatricality that you don't really see in a lot of other noir male characters. And again, they're always like very like upper class culture, sort of like either like some kind of like social or like economic elite. And they're always like, both of them for some reason are like older. I don't know, like I don't know if that's like a direct like, you know, like all queer coded characters in noir are like this, but I noticed like both of them are like older men, and they're both like stated to have like this female love interest. For Waldo, it's Laura, you know, the title character, but all of their interactions with her, like Janet's with Pauline, are just very like, you know, you look at it and you're like, that's supposed to be his love interest, like he's supposed to be interested in this woman, because like personally I'm not seeing it. And I don't know, like I would just sort of like tracing the similarities between like, you know, like Waldo and Janet. I'm sort of like thinking to myself, like, was that like the 40s like gay stereotype of sort of like this put together upper class kind of like very theatrical man, who like doesn't really conform to all of these like, you know, like who doesn't conform in any way to sort of like the kind of like more rugged, you know, down to earth masculine stereotypes.
Well, it's also like if there wasn't the rest of the queer coding, you'd see their interactions with their female love interest, you'd be like, bad acting. Like, because you'd think like these actors who are in these now like famous, you know, film noir films are gonna, you know, have great acting skills, or at least above average. And then you see these scenes where like there's just nothing there between them and the love interest, so you know it's kind of purposeful. Plus I feel like the director would be like, cut, can you give me something more please, if he didn't intend on it being at least a little bit gay.
Yeah, it's
So
like,
that's what I was watching.
Is why I know it's like code, like part of the code, but like why would they intentionally make characters like seem gay if they're not gonna like actually say it, you know? And like this goes part to like what Hugh is saying about like how this impacts like viewers of the time and like all that. Like I feel like by not fully saying and like putting them as the characters that are like less strong, or like I don't know, I feel like it's a negative view.
Yeah, definitely. Like
well, there is like,
oh sorry. And like this in with Cairo, I feel like they kind of put these queer coded characters. I didn't watch Laura, but from your description I assume that he was like not on the good side.
Oh no, he was the murderer.
Yeah, so like they put these like characters that are like the stereotypical representation of what they probably thought a gay man would be, and they put them on like the opposite side of like the you're supposed to be rooting for the main guy, like the protagonist, and then like maybe it was like this like subconscious like homophobic thing. Yeah,
that makes sense.
Well, there's also
I feel like a lot of straight people, or at least a lot of like conservative straight people of the time. Sorry,
you're good.
My computer's
mine's
like
lagging.
Oh, me too. The like conservative like straight people at the time, I feel like now people are a lot more aware of like stereotypes and like all these types of things, but I feel like a lot of straight people watching it wouldn't catch on to the fact that these characters were subtly implying that they were gay.
Yeah,
I guess
do
it's
want to
probably
kind of
there.
Both of your points. Sorry, mine's so laggy.
It's okay.
Wi-Fi. I did want to go up. Yeah, before mine keeps lagging, worse. I did want to go off both because, like both points, because I think on one hand, in Hollywood at this time, there were gay men and gay women, but there were gay men who had to hide their sexuality. They often married a woman who was not into them, but like their friend, to like hide their sexuality. And people knew about them, but as long as it didn't come out publicly, they still got work. They still were worked with, but people within that Hollywood circle would know, because word gets around. People are gossips. And they probably, like, the straight conservative men at that time that were like in charge of Hollywood probably didn't like these gay men in their industry, but like what can they do, because it wasn't public? They can't just boot them out. because the audience would know. And so they probably were like subtly like taking digs at those people, or like at least trying to like harm them within like the industry that they're working in. And then also on the point of people back then wouldn't pick up on it, I think it's just the like we now have not enough but a lot of representation of different, you know, people, and we have a lot of representation now, at least for media for our age, of gay people. And so we see the harmful stereotypes, we see, you know, accounts where people are like, hey, that's harmful, don't do that. And we see correct depictions of the LGBTQ plus community. So we now know and are educated on it. Them back then, they knew gay people exist. They like had their stereotypes, and like they talked about it, they gossip in their neighborhoods, you know, and over like their tea parties and Tupperware parties of like, that's a gay man. And so they would talk shit about them. So like seeing these like negative stereotypes, they'd probably be on the ride home and be like, honey, did you see that gay man was a murderer? And like talk poorly about them. So it feeds into like their society and their culture, while also feeding into the men in Hollywood being like, haha, those gay men that work for us. Sorry about our brief intermission. Technology is not on our side today.
You're saying something.
What was I saying? That is the big question. But yeah, it was just sort of the thing about like how these directors may have wanted to genuinely include this type of representation in their films, but the only way they can is by giving these types of characters tragic endings, because even if they don't explicitly state like this is a gay character, I feel like the studios will still, you know, like studio executives will still like be aware of the stereotypes of their own time, because there's still people living in this era, and be like, hey, you know, like this specific character just made them off too easy. And so, you know, like it's the same thing with noir characters who commit crime on screen. They aren't allowed to have a like fully happy, satisfying ending. It's just sort of like this is the way that things were. And I also think that like additionally, I like, you know, an unfortunate like side effect of like the production codes at the time of like when you can't explicitly state like this character is not straight, and have that be the way that that the audience identifies them as such. The only thing that you can fall back on are stereotypes that the audience may be familiar with and that certain people may recognize. Because it might go over some people's heads and they won't notice anything, but for other people who like know and maybe like know people, you know, like in real life who may have conformed to some of these stereotypes, they'll see that and they'll be like, oh, this character is probably being hinted at, you know, like to be gay or to be, you know, like whatever, because that's kind of all that they got, because it's not like they can say it out loud or show any sort of like actual, you know, like evidence of that type of character and that type of relationship on the screen. So they have to fall back on almost like, you know, the film equivalent of subtext.
Well, yeah, and like on the little rant that I had, I was more based on like the studio execs and, you know, the people with the wallets, because you can have all the creative freedom you want and have and express the opinions that you want, but in order to make the film, you need the money. And if like your film doesn't abide by what the person with the money believes in, you're not gonna get it. You're not gonna get the money to make your film. So I think they kind of had to sacrifice in that sense to like at least put in a gay character and acknowledge gay people exist, even if it's a very subtly and very, you know, stereotypical. But there's at least that acknowledgement of gay people existing, which I think is like the bare minimum that they were allowed to do.
Yeah.
It also, sorry, this is another topic twist, the relationship between Janice and Hagen. It reminded me a lot of Sherlock and Watson, because I have talked to so many people, because Sherlock Holmes has been around for so long, that just think Sherlock and Watson are gay, and I concur, because Watson just goes with Sherlock and does whatever, and like it's the same kind of like queer coded stereotypical thing that we see here, because like Watson is Hagen, like Watson just goes with Sherlock, whatever Sherlock wants, his agenda is Sherlock's agenda. He's, you know, in a silly, goofy mood all the time. I've never seen a depiction of Watson having a female love interest. Or
I mean, like he has his
is,
wife, but he never like, you know.
Yeah, like he's
Maybe
married, but you don't
she's,
see
like,
her.
best friend.
Yeah.
Like in Hollywood back in the day. Oh my god. But like you never really see her. You never see them interact, especially not in like a loving husband and wife way that you'd expect. And Sherlock also, like, he's depicted in some instances as a womanizer. There's some instances where he's depicted as like not sexual, depending on what you see. There's so many depictions, but he's depicted in a lot of instances as like a womanizer, but there's no like serious woman relationship that I've seen depicted. And again, it's kind of like Janeth, where you hear, womanizer, you're with so many women, but you don't see it, and then you also cannot believe it when you see it. Because he has more chemistry with Watson than any other woman I've ever seen.
Yeah.
It's similar to Janeth and Hagen having more tension than he does with like allegedly the woman that he's having an affair with. Like,
Exactly.
okay.
Like, if you're so jealous over Pauline getting with another guy that you kill her, can you at least have some emotion with her?
I mean, like, I
Like,
think
yes,
like
she insulted. She insulted him. That's why he did it. But he started getting mad because she was with another man.
Yeah.
Yeah, like the most that like the thing that got him angry was basically when she insinuated that nobody would sleep with him if he wasn't so wealthy and if he didn't have the status that he had. So it wasn't even with, like, and I'm sleeping with another man, how do you like that? That wasn't what pushed him over the edge. It was like a completely unrelated, like nobody would like be interested in you in any way if you weren't Earl Janeth, if you didn't have all of this like clout behind your name. And I think it's very telling that like that specifically is what pushed him over the edge, like something that is like in no way connected to, like their particular affair or, like women, because she mentions women in like the rest of her rant, but that particular one is just sort of like, you wouldn't be able to bang if you didn't have that $1 million company.
She was like making fun of his appearance, and she was like, "You're disgusting, and you're old, and you're crusty,
sweaty, and
you have
gross."
money." Like, yeah, definitely like Hagen and Janeth being like Watson and Sherlock. Like when you said like Sherlock is sometimes portrayed as a womanizer, and then like I kind of thought back to that kind of overcompensation they're trying to do with Janeth, even though they like effeminated him.
Yeah, I've always thought Sherlock was gay.
The only time, like, you see Sherlock depicted as like a very handsome man. They had Henry Cavill depict him, like, but you never really buy that he's like a womanizer. Like, yes, the actors that play him are, but like Sherlock himself, gay. A homosexual, if you will.
Even in the Irene Adler side story, which is like the one like love interest that Sherlock ever gets, like ever, it's almost like it doesn't really feel like, like inherently like romantically, I don't know, coded. And then after that story, she's out and she's gone. It's almost like the more emphasis is put on the fact that like Irene Adler is the only person to like truly outwit Sherlock than Sherlock was distracted by Irene Adler because like, woman, male hormones, horny.
Big brain. Men are so simple. At least the straight ones are. Yeah, like Sherlock also, like, because he is such an iconic character now, and even back then I think he was, again, wasn't there, don't really know, but because he is such an iconic character, there's no way, like, maybe now or at least in 20 years from now, like, there's no way they're gonna be like, yeah, Sherlock, gay. Like, there's no way, because people would be like, I liked a gay man as a character.
You know how many old people would be enraged if they found out that he was gay?
They'd call their grandkids like, is it gay that I like Sherlock? Like, they'd be so upset.
And that would probably be like another like a thing back then was sort of, like even aside from all the production codes of sort of, like confirming, like characters in these films is sort of, like gay, then like people would be sort of just like, I can't enjoy this movie. One of the characters in it is a homosexual. What does that say about me?
That's like what happened with live action Beauty and the Beast when they had like 5 seconds of a guy dancing with another guy, then all the parents boycotted it. They're like, no, my kids can't be indoctrinated into that kind of life. I was like,
or Finding Dory when there's an animated lesbian couple when your star is Ellen DeGeneres and they're like, oh my god, and I was like, you have Ellen that's voicing it, of course it's gonna be a little bit gay. I was, oh my god, this enraged me. I was like, that's your line,
yeah, because that thought process always makes sense. That whole
there's not like any plot holes in the thoughts at all.
Never
As long as they don't see it, it's like okay.
Yeah, it's always like, again, I think, and I
There's
think
also
that's
no
why,
way
like
fish can be gay.
That's why like the like the coding thing, because it's always about what you can see visually on the screen, and it's always like what's actually there, like in front of our eyes, because the coding can be ignored, and if people basically like if there were like homophobic audiences, if they didn't want to see it, then they could just ignore it. as opposed to putting something visually, like literally in front of your eyes up on the screen, because then it's unignorable and then people can get angry at it.
Yeah, I feel like even if like the character was still dying at the end, like if he was like outwardly gay, people would still be mad about it just because they're like seeing it, you know.
Also,
I mean people that would be mad about a gay character appearing, not you know what I mean.
Yeah. I was gonna ask like how would they have casted somebody to play a queer coded person, especially if like the actor knew. So I went to go check and see if like the guy that played Janeth was like closeted. He was bisexual. It was it says, granted I'm getting this from Wikipedia, so like take it with a grain of salt. But it says he's depicted by Charles Laughton, I think that's how you pronounce it. It's English, couldn't tell you. Laughton's bisexuality was corroborated by several of his contemporaries and generally accepted by Hollywood historians. So he was bisexual, like so he falls into the LGBTQ plus community, like he's in that. But it does, you know, like I haven't checked if Hagen is gay as well, but it is interesting that like there is like representation, even if it's not straight out, of, you know, a bisexual actor that his contemporaries knew about, and he's playing a queer coded man. Like that's like, I think that's the most representation the LGBT plus community is ever going to get at that time, to have, you know, a member of that community play a member of that community, even if it's not explicit. That's pretty interesting. I'm gonna check if Hagen was
I
gay.
wonder if the casting people knew if he was bisexual.
Yeah. And I also like, you know, wonder how the actors themselves sort of like when they're, you know, like if they're seeing like the coding put into this character on top of how that character is portrayed, you know, like cast an antagonistic role, dies at the end of the film, of sort of, you know, like reconciling that with sort of, you know, like how would I feel, you know, like willingly taking on this role and, you know, like putting myself into this portrayal, you know, of like, you know, almost like contributing to, you know, like the negative perception of my own identity. But then sort of like the question of like, okay, well, if I don't take it, then like, you know, who's going to, and is it going to be even worse when it's played by an actor who like has like absolutely no inside knowledge of the character
like
that they're coding this
more
as.
stereotypical.
Yeah.
Like if a straight actor was playing like a gay character or like closeted character, it might be like even more offensive.
Yeah.
I can't find anything that says the guy that played Hagen, George McCready, again, can't pronounce these names, was gay. But it does say something about him knowing that Charles Laughton was bisexual, or at least thinking, you know, suspecting, which is interesting. Again, that does show something on that character being comfy with at least playing the suspected love interest or, you know, partner of a gay individual.
Yeah, and the fact that that's even like recorded, you know, like I don't know, like we're assuming that they're gay, but like maybe it was like more known than we thought. The fact that like the other co-stars knew and all that.
It is interesting, like the hidden, or at least not fully expressed, gay scene within Hollywood. Because obviously there's, you know, LGBT plus community members within Hollywood at this time. And I'm saying that under the whole umbrella because you never know who was what. But and like the fact that they like all kind of knew, or like were like people know, but it was just like you could not talk about it. And even today people don't feel safe talking about it. But like imagine being like 1945, 1948 and just not being able to like mention it at all. And then like the risk of your whole career. Like that's bonkers to me. It still happens now, but that's wild.
And then sort of, you know, like it is amazing to me how they were like even able to build, you know, like these like, you know, like shadow communities like within, you know, like these industries, and sort of like find each other in the first place, because like the amount of trust that you would have to have in another person to like, you know, confess of sort of, you know, like, hey, you know, like here's, you know, like that, like this is what I am, I'm trusting you with this information, and just like hoping that, you know, like they've still got your back, that it won't get out, you know, like that they won't like in some way, that they won't use this against you in some way in the future. I don't know, it's just like, yeah, I can't even imagine.
Like the most I can even relate this to in my brain is like Marsha P. Johnson, and that which I can't remember like what time period that was. I think I want to say 80s, but I could be incorrect on that.
I think it's 70s or
And
80s Stonewall was.
yeah, because I'm obsessed with her and I love her. And there's a lot of true crime cases around this time period around that community as well, which is like why I feed into it. And the lady from Gaslight. But it's just like that's like the most I can think of. And even then there was like at least more knowledge and like more people coming into like being accepting of it. But like there's I like that's the most I can relate to, and that's not even close to what it was in the 1940s. So like reading the queer coding on this, we're talking about how stereotypical it was, and like we know this now. And sure, it was probably intentional at that time too, but it's also like, what did they actually like? How educated were they on these communities? Like the people that like wrote this and made this, they might not have actually like been that educated. They might have just like heard people talking like on the corner in like the grocery store, double indemnity style, of about these communities, and then just been like, oh, that's the truth. We're going to depict it that way without even knowing.
Or just a question of like, if you know like one person who is gay, or like in any other way, be like any identity under the umbrella, and you know that one person, so like naturally I think like if you're writing characters that are of these identities, you're going to naturally default to the one like real life example that and you're just going to write like every single character like that, because this is the only representative that in real life, which is why I feel like maybe a lot of the criteria for like, oh, what makes a gay person is very narrow, because even people who may have even like interacted with like actual members of the community and not just heard rumors or stereotypes, were interacting with like a very, very small percentage of like the actual community. And so they've got like a very limited pool of actual like real life examples to draw from.
Yeah, I mean, it's like being like, I have a friend who's gay and he loves show tunes. Why don't you?
Mhm.
Like, he's a big fan of Broadway. Like, it's like that, but like worse somehow. I don't know. Not worse, but still gross.
I guess because like they're almost mandated to give them bad endings or to cast them in a negative light. So you've got limited portrayals, and then you're locked into making them in some way antagonistic or villainous.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they can't be shown in a good light, because then it's like promoting homosexuality and the gay agenda, which you can't
have that.
No promotion of the gays.
Nope.
Absolutely not.
I think that's all like I personally had on like the queer coding, because I think I briefly mentioned Neff and Keys in relation to the relationship of like Janeth and Hagen, when like how like they were like confidants, like Neff like spilled his guts about his crime to Keys because they trust each other, and then Janeth did the same thing to Hagen because they trust each other. But aside from that like little point, if we don't have any more insights, I think it's time for some noir missed connections. So
Let's get it started.
the brave soul that presents their misconnection first. Okay.
Anna Shall, nicely, could you pull it up, please?
Yes, I can.
I am ready to do a dramatic reading.
Okay, can you see that?
All right. Yes. Dennis, I know you're a T-man, but won't you be my man? Thank you. Thank you. So excited to say it like that.
Fellas, is it gay to infiltrate the mob with your fellow agent?
Yeah, maybe their relationship is good. Two men.
Like, I'm just saying, they were sleeping in very small hotel rooms together for like months with no contact, like with their wives or like anybody.
They didn't even imagine the rule wasn't they didn't have to talk to their wives. They just chose to.
Yeah.
They're like, I'd rather talk to this guy than you.
Just like, sorry, honey, I'm on an investigation with the boys.
Hanging out with the boys. Like
it's a perpetual Saturday.
Like little things. Like the sauna. I was like, I'm gonna go sit in the sauna with the boys on my.
The sauna scenes in T-Men were just like another thing that like I don't know. I don't really have any evidence for them beyond like I was watching them and I'm like, seems a little fruity to me. Like when the schemer like was trying to get out and the other dude just stands up and blocks his way. And I remember I was watching that and I was just like, so
like, so sus.
Are you gonna kiss?
Also, like, the fact that the guys that use these saunas would be like these big macho men, they didn't think it was gay to be basically naked in a hot, steamy room together.
No, yeah.
Mhm.
No, it
That's a
was-
little fruity, sir.
yeah. Don't pass judgment if you're gonna go steam with the boys.
Literally. It's a fun activity, but at least, like, admit it's a little fruity.
No, yeah. Here, mine next.
Okay.
Okay. This one's about double indemnity. It says, to the couple that hangs out in the local grocery store, are y'all doing okay? Also, please stop creating sexual tension in front of the canned goods. So a little unsuspecting bystander, a little mom trying to get food for her child while they're talking about murder and sex in the grocery store, because that's the
Also-
only place to talk about murder and sex.
You totally
It's the
wrote
sexiest
it-
place to do it.
Yeah.
You totally wrote it in the same way that like Clark kids write. Fuck you.
Actually, how many
With the
misconnections
little
have
heart
you
emoji
written?
at the end and everything.
I plead the fifth. Let me honest. 0.
We've all written a misconnection once in a while. Have I written one about myself? Maybe.
Oh, wait, that's a sad.
No, I haven't. It was just a joke.
I remember I saw one about me, and it was just like it was like last year or something, and it was like, to the goth sophomore with the really pretty hair, hi. I was like, okay. I don't know.
I got sophomore with
If-
that really
if-
pretty hair.
If whoever wrote it is watching this video, hi, I saw it a year ago.
I was waiting for one last year, like, to the girl who only wears Michael Kraft t-shirts.
Clark must
Fashion staple.
be like my favorite thing. I have post notifications on. Like,
That's
that
so
keeps me going.
Yeah, I
It's so
probably-
exciting. They posted at
Um,
4 a.m. today and someone commented, go to sleep.
Clark Connections works harder than anyone else. They got to read through everybody's confessions.
They're the backbone of this institution.
Yeah. Forget Papa Freud. No. It's whoever runs that Clark Connections account.
Well, they exude the same horniness as Papa Freud.
Yeah. Just a little bit. Just a little bit.
I can go next. I'm not gonna read mine.
Oh, can I read it?
Put it on the sure, we'll just put it on the screen. It's the most recent.
Oh, I'm so excited to cause some chaos.
Do you want to play it? It's in the chat. I can't share.
Yeah, it's in the
Let's see. Definitely, if you go, I can pull up Elena's to screen share. It can be like a
yeah.
branch.
Did you give us screen sharing privileges? Because I don't know if
I think I did.
yeah, because I know that sometimes they're on and sometimes the host has to like give us them, but yeah, I can try.
Oh no, you did not give us screen sharing privileges. Oh my god, how dare you?
Just put it on.
Let me see if it works.
Oh,
Okay, yeah.
I can
So
go now.
basically the inspiration that I had for mine was that like I know that like 90% of the misconnections account is sort of like, oh, I really like this person. This person's really hot. I saw like this, like whatever. I love the random, really negative misconnections that get shared. Just sort of, like, hey, to the dumbass outside of like here, fuck you. I
To the
live
one
for
peeing
those
outside of
personally.
right.
Yeah, the guy who
Yeah.
outside
Or like the dude who peed outside the dog window.
bathroom to the left.
Yeah, so
There's
that's
a
what
bathroom on the left.
that's what I took inspiration from. And so this is mine. Is it up? Can you see it?
Yeah.
The idiot at Crime Waste who got the whole building shut down for the day. Some of us have jobs.
Wow.
And I don't know, I just thought of like, like when the whole building got shut down, the big clock, when they were like looking for the murder. I feel like there was somebody at one of the other magazines who like the whole thing got shut down. They were just like, God damn it, this could have been an email.
Yeah.
It's like, that's how I feel when I'm driving home from work after traffic and all I want to do is get a pizza, but it closes in 10 minutes. And I'm just like, the pedal is on the right. Please step on it. I need my cheesy bread.
So mine is just a good note to end on, I guess.
Oh, I'm so excited for it.
From the point of view of Hagen, for example, and it's towards Janice. So I can share my screen and Anna will be reading it.
Oh my god, I'm so excited. Okay. Janice, I know you like that big clock, but I like to see your big. Thank you.
Yeah, what I mean.
And of course, it's anonymous.
Yeah.
Who knows who truly said it? It could have been Stroud.
I just
Could've been
imagine like
Mrs.
the
Stroud.
whole. I just imagine like the whole building, like every employee, like like reading this on like Janeth Publications misconnections and being like, huh, I wonder.
If I was Stroud the day I quit, I would have made that the headline and just dipped.
Us do arson and then quit.
Yeah.
There you go.
I would have
Some people
shut
do
down the
arson,
clock on
some people
purpose. I know
post
he did it on
misinformation.
accident, but I would have pressed this kill switch on purpose and left.
It's the only thing worthy of killing.
Yeah.
The kill switch.
Time's a construct. It doesn't actually exist. He didn't cause any damage.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. On that note, thank you, Elena.
Thank you so much for letting me read that.
I'll see you guys next week. So,
Bye.
bye.